Welcome to the Workcenters and Routings training session. I'm your Exact Max Americas trainer, Vince Stefanetti. In this session, we're going to show you how easy it is to start implementing shop orders in Max. Now, we're going to go over all the basics and get into more detail as we move along. Don't be worried if you know little or nothing about the module. We're going to start at the beginning and explain everything. It is important to know that you have a full set of documentation in PDF format installed with your Mac system. You also have an online portal that contains a knowledge base and many other resources. You can gain access to the portal by navigating to https://customers.exact.com. If you do not yet have access to the portal, make sure you contact your customer advocate so you can get a username and password. Now let's take a look at what we're going to learn today. We're going to show you how to set up shop floor execution. We'll show you how to process shop orders and rework orders. We'll show you how to manage released orders and how to run reports. Now, before we navigate into the software, let's have a look at the overall flow of information through shop floor control and what the process is. The MRP explosion runs and releases planned orders. These planned orders can be approved and then released. You print shop paperwork, you pick and issue components, you post completions or post scrap, and then you receive to stock the product. Now in Max, the MRP explosion runs and creates planned orders. These are 4 series planned orders. They have a type of PL and their status is 1, planned. The next thing that happens is the planned orders get approved. So the planner navigates to the appropriate screens in Max and approves the orders. This changes the status and the type. The type becomes MF, manufactured order, and the status becomes 2, approved. After that's done, those approved orders can then be released. So they're released to the shop. They become a 5 series order with the type of MF, manufactured order, with a status of 3, released. Next, shop paperwork is printed, and then you actually pick the components and do an issue transaction. Following that, you perform post-operation completions and post-scrap. And finally, receive the product to stock. Now, the shop floor execution module enables you to track and control work in process as it flows through your manufacturing environment. This module maintains important work center, routing, and queue status information necessary for a smoothly managed shop. Shop floor execution monitors the queue and backlog of work in each work center. This information is important for controlling shop lead times. In addition, work center scheduling is provided in order to help in dispatching and setting priorities. Now let's take a look at the system setup necessary to make this all work. Okay, so what we'll have to do is we'll have to set up the application preferences, define work centers, add routings, and add defect codes. Okay, so we're going to log into Max and set this stuff up. Double-click on the icon on your desktop. You'll be presented with the logon screen. Default login is manager all capitals and password all capitals. Okay, we have the system manager. We'll click on the production tab and select shop floor execution. Now, the general process of shop floor execution in Max involves tracking quantity, completions, and labor at various stages of production. So let's take a quick tour. If you click on this button here, we'll get our control panel. We'll go ahead and make sure that that's pinned and appearing there. We'll bring that up so you can see you have shortcuts, notes, and system notes just like all the other modules in Max. Under activity, we have maintain defect codes, maintain the operation schedule, the order navigator, post component scrap, post order split, post operation, maintain routings and routing notes, the creation of shop orders, and some other additional items here for subcontract and then work center maintenance. Under inquiries, there are several things. You have a whole series of reports, batch processes, options, your tools menu, the standard Windows menu, and help. Okay, so we're going to look at how we actually go through and set up shop floor execution in Max so you can begin processing. The first thing we're going to take a look at is the application preferences. So if you click on Options, Preferences, the first thing you're going to see here is the application window maximized. If you want it to save the size of the window when you exit, then uncheck that and it won't go maximized every time you open up the module. You want to enter in your default planner initials here as well. Okay, so let's look at defect codes, setting up work centers, and then setting up routings. Click on Activity and go to Defect Code. Now, defect codes in Max are important to categorize the defects when you're performing post-component scrap or you're scrapping during post-operation completion. The yellow highlight means the field is browsable, so we'll double-click on that and we'll see what defect codes we have here. So we have 4 of them here: cosmetic defect, engineering design, mechanical defect, and operator error. If we look at the different screens here that utilize defect code, we can go to post-component scrap and see that the defect code is here and browsable. And if we go to post-operation completion, over here you can specify a defect code. So if you want to keep categorization of defect codes, then you got to make sure that you enter them in the system through this dialog box. You can add new ones, you can maintain them. Once they're added, you have to be a supervisor to actually remove defect codes. Now additionally, if we go back over to System Manager, we go into Activity, System Configuration, and we click on Shop Floor Execution, you'll see this key right here, Defect Code Required. Now if that's set to yes, the system will not allow you to post an operation with scrap or post component scrap unless a defect code is entered. So you can specify that here if you want to enforce the usage of defect codes. Okay, let's go back over to shop floor execution. And the next thing we're going to have a look at here is Workcenters. Each manufacturing step tracked by the shop floor execution module must be assigned a location on the shop floor called a work center. So that's maintained in this screen right here. You enter in the work center identifier. This is up to 5 characters. We'll type in an example here. And then there's several other configuration items here. Type defines the type of work center that this is. The standard one for use is shop, unless you're using a planning work center, which does not allow operation completions. This is for planning purposes only. If you have the subcontract module, then you can select an outside vendor process. Standard is shop. Standard queue is the number of work days required to provide flexible levels of work center scheduling without causing excessive backlog. This value is the same as the standard lead time for an operation, including setup time, run time, move, and queue time. Available hours is the number of labor hours per day normally scheduled for the work center. For example, if a work center is manned by a total of 6 people during one 8-hour shift, then the available hours would be 48. Include setup. Now if the include setup switch is set to yes, checked in this case right here, Max includes setup time in load and queue calculations. If the include setup switch is set to yes, checked in this case here, Max includes setup time in load and queue calculations. The flag does not affect the cost roll at all. Now the overhead rate here can be overridden by typing in a different value on the work center. However, it defaults to the overhead rate that's actually specified in the System Manager under Configuration Settings. So we'll click over to System Manager here, go to Activity, System Configuration, and if you click on Costing, you'll see here Labor Burden. It's set at 100. We're going to change that, make that 200. Click OK, close that, and then we'll close Shop Floor. And we'll open it again, and we'll go back to Work Center, and as you can see now the default is 200. So we'll go ahead and enter our information again for the one we're going to save. Okay, so let's look at the labor rate. Okay, now this is the standard labor rate at the Work Center. You can override it here if it changes from the default that's specified in System Manager. If we go back over there one more time and we take a look at the configuration settings under costing, there are a few things here. I mean, you have the labor burden rate, what we just adjusted, and then you have the labor rate. So you can change that here if you want to, and then the Work Centers will default to the new labor rate. Now, if you specify your routing and setup codes here under costing to yes, then that means that the cost rollup is going to use the labor rate at the Work Center and calculate cost based on the labor rate at the Work Center plus the run and setup time that you specify on the parts routing. We'll get to that a little bit later, but you can change those here. We're going to go ahead and set them to yes because we're going to do that. We're going to use the labor rate and the runtime and setup time at our Work Centers to calculate our costs. This is covered thoroughly in the section on costing, which is a later lesson that we'll be doing, but I just wanted to cover those here and highlight them so you understand that this is where they're set. So we'll go ahead and close that. We'll go back here, and you can override that here if you want to. After closing the module and reopening it again, it would bring in the default for all new Work Centers. Okay, and then next is utilization. So this percentage determines how many hours per day a Work Center is available versus the number of labor hours per day the Work Center is manned. So for example, if a Work Center has 40 manned hours and 96% utilization, the actual available hours for that Work Center is 36, which is 40 times 0.96. Okay, well you can utilize here user-defined key and reference fields if you'd like. The critical resource checkbox is only used if you have the advanced planning module. Now you can see that the monitor load button is now active. When this Work Center actually has load and queue into it, then you can click the monitor load button to take a look at that. You can refresh here. The other button that will become active if it's available is the extended fields, and this is actually set up in the user design fields which were available in the System Manager. Okay, so we'll go ahead and close this dialog box, and we're going to take a look at an inquiry here that allows you to view Work Center load. You can click on that, select a particular Work Center, and see the current load in queue. That was also accessible right in that screen under Work Center, under Monitor Load. Okay, once you've set up your Work Centers, the next action is to set up your parts routing. Okay, so we use this dialog box here to actually define all those routing steps, and they're defined by an operation sequence number. So the part routing is the series of steps that a part goes through in order to be produced. So you specify a part ID, its sequence number, and so on. To give a quick example of that, we can go into inquiries here, part routing, enter in one of our part numbers, and it'll display the sequences that it goes through in order to be produced. So here's our Work Centers, there's our sequence number in order, a description of what is done, and we also define run and setup time to track labor. Okay, so we're going to continue to work with our part number 11,000 here, the computer max. And we're going to take a look at some of these fields here. Our alternate code in Max 5.5, you now have the ability to set up alternate routings for a part. If we were to look at the standard routing for our part ID here, as we viewed it before, you'll see we have a whole series of sequences here for that part. We'll select 01, and there's all our sequences there. But we're going to maintain one and then look at the detail here. So we're going to set up one for alternate number 2, which is an alternate routing, and we're going to go ahead and build this routing. Okay, so let's enter in operation sequence number. Now you want to get these numbers in a logical sequence, provide a numbering system that is a logical sequence there. As you saw before, when we looked here earlier, we were at 0010, 0020, and so on. So you want to sequence them logically so that they print out properly and they are in a numerical sequence. We're building a new one for alternate 2 here, which is our alternate routing, so we're going to start with this number here and sequence it from there. So we'll call this one assemble. And we'll assign a work center to it. We'll select electrical assembly. And let's look at this here, notes. So you have the ability here to select generic or part notes by specifying the note number. Here, this is a browsable field, and there's some notes in here now, but I'll also show you here that you have the ability to maintain those notes. If you go to Activity from the menu and select Routing Notes, you can enter in generic notes or part notes here for a specific part ID. We'll look at our 11,000 part here, see if we have any notes. Okay, well there are no part notes right now, but if we wanted to, we can add a note here. And we can save that. And then that part note is available here for us to select when we create this routing. Okay, well just to show you an example of that, we've added that note number right here, and we have a series of notes that are available. They're all right here, and their sequence numbers are right here. So specifying the first note number allows all succeeding ones to print as well. Now you can make combinations of these things and change the next note number so you can only print a certain series of notes when specifying the number here, right here. So if we had a set of notes, say after 4 here, we can enter in that series of notes right here and specify that note number, just like say we wanted to only print from note number 3 on, just Y and Z here, we would specify that number. But we're going to go ahead and print them all. I'm going to enter in that one again and select it, and we'll go ahead and save this routing. Now if you go to Shop Paperwork, there's a couple things that can be printed out here. Reference designators will print with the pick list. The routing notes will print with the routing list. So we're going to select an order that we have in here just to show you that. And it's our last one entered. I'll click that and run the report. And as you can see here, here's our reference designators, which we entered in the Bills of Materials module. But if we go down to the next page, here's our routing notes here. And they're associated with the sequence number, so you have this whole set of notes here printing out for that part ID and sequence number. Likewise, if you have generic notes that you always want to print, then you can select it in the routing maintenance window there, and they'll print here as well. Okay, so let's look at some more detail here. If you want to track changes to the part routing, then you can use this section right here, part revision level. When you first add a part routing, it's unchecked. But when you go back and you change it, this becomes checked. Now you can change the date here as well. You can browse the shop calendar and specify a date here, but you have to have supervisory rights to do that. Also, it's going to increment the rev level here sequentially, so you have to use a numeric sequence here. You can't specify an alpha character in this field. Okay, the quantity per is the number of pieces processed per operation expressed in bill of materials unit of measure. The default is 1. Quantity per affects total runtime and may affect planned setup time. Now the runtime here is the planned runtime for this operation. It's your standard runtime, and this is used for the cost roll-up if you have the switches set to roll up cost through your part routing. Now the way that it's specified here is in decimal quantity, so 0.25 is going to be 15 minutes. That's different than what you'll see in post-operation completion, and you'll see hours, minutes, and seconds in here. I'll show you that real quick. As you can see here, it's different: hours, minutes, seconds. So you want to specify the amount of runtime for this operation in a decimal quantity here. Okay, and your setup time here is your planned setup time for this operation. Now, it's the amount of setup time based on the setup type. Now, if it's set to order, then it's just going to be specified just for that one order. But if you have batch, daily, or unit, then it'll adjust accordingly based on whatever your setup type is, because it's only going to give one setup time per batch, per day, or per unit. So specify your setup time here in a decimal quantity, and also if you have the flag set to roll costs through your routing, you can specify to roll the setup time as well. Now the planned scrap percentage, this is an interesting field. You would want to enter in a % of scrap expected at this routing step. Now over in System Manager, in order for that to have any effect on the cost, you would have to set up the yield calculation, and that's done in shop floor control under planned scrap. This flag here, yield calculation, if it's set to yes, then it's actually going to use that planned scrap when you do the cost roll. So if you actually want to do that and roll that into your cost, you need to make sure that you have this set to yes. Okay, so let's go back over there now. Now you may want to specify move days if you're going to be moving material from one space to the next in your manufacturing environment. You could specify this here. This is different than the transit time that's entered in for subcontract processes. If you need move days and you want to specify them, then go ahead and put them here. If not, go ahead and set it to 0. And for subcontract, you should always have this set to 0 as well. Okay, now your operation type can either be unit, batch, comment, part ID, or variable. Now the unit operation type is used to indicate that a job will be processed on a unit by unit basis. For batch, this indicates that a job will be processed in batch of size quantity per. This allows a per batch runtime, setup time, planned scrap, and move days. Now for comment, a comment operation is actually printed on the paperwork for reference information only. Comments are entered in the 25-character operation description field. If comments require more than 25 characters, create several comment operations by incrementing the operation sequence number for each. Do not enter any planned runtime, setup time, standard type, or quantity per information for comment operations. This type of operation does not need to be posted using post-operation completion because it just displays as a comment on the part routing. Now let's have a look at part ID. So this is a special kind of operation. As you can see here, we got a warning. It says that we've selected an invalid operation type and it has to be set to P, which is for process sheet paperwork, and you have to do that in the configuration section of the system. So we'll go over and do that, and then I'll explain to you how this is actually used. So system configuration, we'll go to shop floor, and we'll select paperwork format P. and save that. Okay, we'll go back to shop floor. And we'll open it back up again. And grab our routing step. Okay, and we'll change that to P. Now as you can see here, when you select part identifier, it gives you the tool reference browser, and you have this checkbox here, components only. So the components only checkbox toggles between the bill of material and the part master. So you can select one or the other there. If you select components only, it's going to browse on the components associated with this bill of material. Okay, and there's our components. We'll select one of them here. And you can save that. And what this is actually telling you, this is not an operation that's posted. It's actually an operation that's defining that a part identifier needs to be gotten as in a tool part. If we go to bills of materials, and we go to the visual bill of materials, we'll look at our BOM here for our computer Macs. We don't have any tools specified on here now, but we could. If we look by part type and select T for tool, we have one tool defined in the system, and we'll go ahead and drag that on there. And we'll save that bill of material. We'll go back over to shop floor, and we'll look for components only. And we'll search by our parent part. And there it is right there. So we'll grab that. And that's our tool that we need for this particular job. Now, if you want to specify another tool that's in the part master, you could do that too. We could have just as well selected it from the part master if we had a series of tools there that we wanted to select for this particular operation. And we can search by part type, which is tool. And there's our tool part again. We'll go ahead and select that and drop it in there. And we could save that. Now, you're not going to want to enter in any of these fields here. You're actually not allowed to, because you're only specifying that this is a part to be picked in that operation, in that sequence number. Okay, we can take a look at an example of that. As you can see here, we've added a new operation 5 onto this entire routing here, and we've specified a part identifier, and we put in the tool reference right here. If we go through and add an order, we'll go ahead and add a shop order here for our part. And there's our bill, but we'll use the original bill, not the alternate. And we'll select a routing here, which is not the alternate either, the basic one. And you can see here our last operation is this part ID operation, and it specifies it here as a part identifier operation. We'll go ahead and save that order, and then we'll go ahead and print the process sheet paperwork and see what it looks like. So we're going to add our order number and go ahead and run that. Alright, so here's our process sheet. We'll scroll down a little bit here so you can see that last operation. So on the process sheet, it's showing the work center ID or the component part. We've specified our tool here, and here's our description. So that's just a quick example. You can use process sheet and use the tool reference there and specify those as I just showed you for those operations. And there you go. Okay, so let's go back to another operation step earlier in this routing, our first one, and let's take a look at standard type. The standard type specifies how this particular operation was actually estimated, or how it was actually designed through an MRP calculation, time motion study, estimated, and so on. So you can specify that here. Now the next item here is quite important. It's the setup type, and there's several different ones. There's batch, daily, order, and unit, and we touched on this a little bit earlier. Now let's take a look at order. This is a fairly important one because it's calculated a little bit different than the other ones. Now for order setup, shop floor execution calculates one setup for the entire operation. The order quantity is therefore not relevant to the total setup. So if the planned setup time is per se a half an hour, the total setup time is also a half hour. Now for costing purposes, this O or order setup type uses the average order quantity, and that's actually entered in inventory part data and is used to allocate the setup cost for an order. The setup cost per unit is calculated as the planned run time divided by the quantity per, plus the planned setup time divided by the quantity per times the average order quantity. So if we go over to inventory control, we can go to inventory part data. Now you can access this in bills and materials as well. We'll pick a part here, and you can see this field here, average order quantity. It's set to 100 right here. But your average order quantity could be any number, and it will be used for this calculation for setup time. Okay, let's go back. Okay, so a couple other things on the screen here. You have the effective date for the routing, so you can actually specify changes in the part routing and give it a future effective date for it to roll in. You can check the include button, and that'll actually include the setup time. You could specify the approved by initials here, and you can utilize the user-defined key and reference fields. And if you are using the user-defined fields and have activated them for the routing maintenance screen, then this button here will become active. Okay, one other facility of interest is the ability to copy routings. If you go to batch and you select copy routings, you can copy from a part ID and alternate code to another part ID and alternate code, so you can move your routings around and manipulate them from part to part, or copy them over to new parts. You have several options here to include part identifier operations, comment operations, routing notes, even the associated files. So you have a number of different selections here that you can specify when you're doing the copy routing. Okay, now the only other thing we want to look at here regarding setup is the establishment of your defect codes. And defect codes are maintained from the activity menu, defect code, and quite simply you enter in the code. We have a few entered in here: cosmetic defect, engineering design, mechanical defect, and so on. You quite simply enter them in here and give them the description, and you've established your defect codes that can be posted when you're doing scrap. Okay, so that's all that we have on the setup. Next thing we're going to do is look at how to actually process shop orders. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at here is the Order Navigator. So go to Activity, Order Navigator. Now I'll precede this by telling you that you can actually maintain and create master scheduled orders with a status of 1, 2, or 3, that's planned, approved, or released, or manufactured orders with a status of 3, released, and that's done through Activity Shop Order. However, if you recall back to our process earlier, the process began with running the MRP explosion and then approving those orders and then releasing them there. You could do that, but you have the Order Navigator here to actually fulfill some of that functionality as well. So if we go into here and open up our range, we'll just do it by order number and we'll run a query. As you can see here, it's giving us all the planned orders, all the approved orders, and all the released orders for purchased parts and manufactured parts. You can even have it show you subcontract parts as well, or maintenance objects. Okay, so we're going to uncheck purchase parts here and just look at manufactured parts. Now, just to orient you to the screen a little bit here, so it has the order number, and you can toggle the top to sort up or down on any of these fields. And you have the checkboxes here to approve or release. And you can even make the order firm here as well. It shows you the order quantity, whether an alternate code is being used or an alternate routing is being used. These can be maintained as well. It'll show you the lot and serial number information as well, and give you the current, original, and the suggested start date from MRP. If we scroll over a little bit further, it shows us the description and a number of other fields here. Now you can grab these fields and move them around. If we wanted to move our reference over here, we could do that, or if we wanted to put our part description over near our part identifier, we could do that as well. So you have some facilities here to rearrange the screen and show it how you would like to see it. We'll move the description over here next to our part. There we go. Okay, so let's take a look at what we can actually use this for. Okay, so we'll uncheck approved and released, and we'll only select manufactured parts because we're just interested in releasing the shop orders that need to be built. So we'll hit query, and you can see here we need some system units, some cabinets, and some motherboards, and it gives us the quantity here. Now, planned orders are status 1, approved orders are status 2, and released orders are status 3. So if we want to move these along in the sequence as we covered earlier, we can approve it by checking right here and saving. That'll move it to status 2. If we query again, that should drop off because now it's just approved. We'll uncheck that, and it's probably the only approved one we have, and there it is. Okay, now if we wanted to take this same order here and then release it to the shop floor, we could do that by checking this box and saving, and that'll change it. You'll see it'll give a pop-up box saying that it's changing this approved planned order to a shop order with type MF. So let's go ahead and save. Okay, and if we looked at our release orders now, the latest one, this, is for the 10 of Computer Max, which we just did. So we can double click on that and look at the order detail. It gives us all the information about the order, its statuses, and whether it's firm planned or not. If there was an alternate BOM or routing on this, it would specify it here, give us all our quantity information, primary location, who the planner was, what the revision is, and so on. It also displays down here the part quantities, min, max, and multiple order quantities, if there's any order point or safety stock, and some additional part data here for manufacturing lead time, and so on. And then our current and original due dates, lot and serial number, and user-defined fields. Okay. Now, like many of the screens in Max, you have preferences for this order navigator. If you click on options and select preferences, you could select to autosave changed items, show the message that it's being saved. You can show de-expedited orders, which is probably a good idea. You can specify roundings, and you can allow a past due date as well. So we'll check all those. We'll keep the decimal places at 4. And let's see if we have anything de-expedited here so you can see that. Not for this part, but let's see if there's anything else there. Okay, well there's one there. So we can take a look at that. This order wasn't needed for some reason. And if you hold down your left control key and you double click on the current due date, you can then change the date from the de-expedite date, which is way out into the future in 2030, and then you can change the date to whatever you like. So we'll specify a new date here. We'll give it a a year not quite as far out as that. Bring it back into the current year and give it a date, and we can save that. Okay, and that moves it out of the de-expedite status. The de-expedite status that you see here is because MRP evaluated that the order was not needed given the current demand, and it moves it out to the 2030 date, which is a de-expedite date way out into the future. But you can change that. If you don't want MRP to de-expedite or change the dates on your released orders, you need to make sure that you mark them as firm planned here. You can even code the part as firm planned as well, so that it automatically specifies a firm plan code. Alright, so really what you have here in the Order Navigator is the ability to manipulate information regarding the orders after the MRP run. You can select the status here. You can view only released orders or only planned orders, and you can move them through their sequences by approving and releasing. So you can do it all in one shot here by approving and releasing on the same order, and then saving that. That'll release this order to the shop floor. And likewise, if we wanted to continue on doing that, we most certainly could. And it tells you that it's moving from the status 1 to the status 3 shop order. We'll do that again. I'll show you. See, it's taking that order to a 5 order. And if we want to look at only the released ones, we can do that. And if we wanted to specify a specific part ID, we could do that too. So when you're dealing with lots of data, you can use the filters here to specify ranges by the due date of the order, the actual order number, a planner ID, a UDF key that you specify, or even the commodity code. So you have a number of different sort options here to display information and to review information in the Order Navigator. But this is your main tool that you'll use to approve orders and release them to the shop after the MRP explosion. Move them through their statuses and get them released to the shop floor. One other thing that I omitted a little bit earlier that I should cover here for you is that you have the ability to specify your alternate BOM and routing information here too, because this is browsable. If you double click on the cell for the alternate code, it gives you the browser for alternate processes, and you can make a selection here if you want to select an alternate BOM or routing for a particular order. So you can double click on those fields, the alternate BOM code and the alternate routing, and make a selection in this screen if you want to make those changes at this point. Okay, so now let's go over to the shop order. Okay, and we'll open shop order. Okay, so here's our shop order dialog box here, and let's tour through a number of different facilities that we have here and fields. Of course, you have your order number, and you can add either a shop order or a master scheduled order here, and you can determine the status. We'll go ahead and put in a part. We'll work with the one we've been working with here, and we'll put in a quantity. Now this could also have been approved through the Order Navigator, but we're adding one on the fly here, and I'll show you all the different fields. But the editing capabilities and everything that are available through an approved order through the Order Navigator are just the same as adding it on the fly here. Okay, so let's take a look at these sections. So the top section here is all the header information for the order. Below here we have tabs for the order bill of materials and the order routing. You also have some preferences that you can set here. You can allow past due dates to be entered for shop orders or not if you like. We're going to allow that here, and we're going to set our decimal places for 4. If you want to round up or apply rounding to the order bill of material, you can do that here too. We're going to specify no routing. Okay, so the header information contains the order number, the part number. These are both browsable, and they have the associate function that can be used here too. And that allows you to attach documents if you'd like to the order. You specify the current due date for the order. You can enter in the quantity for the order. It will show you the extended quantity and the balance due. You can specify whether you want to create the order bill of material or create the order routing or not. You can enter in a reference, and under customer order here, what you'll see here if you're using order policy O or order policy D is the associated customer order. Now you have to set a flag in System Manager sales order in order to have this reference come down for every planned order that gets created. That's covered more in the MRP module training session. Okay, so at this point we're going to go ahead and click the query button and have it fill in the bill and routing information. And as you can see, after doing that, these fields become active and you can edit the header information. The schedule flag specifies whether the system is going to use standard queue or runtime using routing to schedule the job. We'll go back to standard queue. You can specify the primary location, the revision level, the planner ID, and whether this is a firm order or not, meaning that MRP will not automatically reschedule it for you. You can enter in user-defined key and reference information, and if lot and serial tracking is active, then you can actually assign lot and serial information here. Now on order creation, if you have the lot SFC checkbox checked for the part, then this would be active here because you have to assign the lot and serial information when the order is added at the very beginning here, when it's a released order. Okay, so let's look at the grids down here. We have the order bill of material and the order routing. We have the alternate code here, and we have this checkbox to blow through pseudo. It's checked to do that. We don't have any pseudos on this bill of material, but if we did, what it would do is it would actually blow through the pseudo and give us requirements for all the components beneath a pseudo part in the bill of material. Okay, so for our example here, we're going to double click here on the alternate code. We're going to see what's available. There are several here, but actually what we want to do is we don't want to use an alternate code because I want to show you a series of components on the original bill of materials, or the one without the alternate code. So we're just going to blank that out. We'll hit query again, and as you can see, it's using the bill of material that does not have the alternate code assigned to it. Likewise on the routing, we're going to go back to our original routing here and not use the alternate code. We'll hit the query button and it gives us all the operation sequences for the original. Okay, so you have full editing capabilities on the order bill of material. You can add, delete, include, exclude items here. If we uncheck a few of these and hit query, they're going to disappear. But if we wanted to add some, we could. You can see it says add more parts here. You double click on that, and if you hit the query button, you can select parts and add them. Okay, it gives you the description, the current quantity, the current due date. These can be changed as well. Any lead time offset you want to specify, whether there's been anything issued to the job or not, or to these components rather, and if there's a shortage or not, your current on-hand quantity for that component, the quantity per, the scrap amount, manufacturer's part number information, and it will also give you the part type code. Now if you double click an item, you get the order bill details for this specific part. So it gives you the quantity and all the details here that you can edit. Now we're going to click on the Routing tab here, and likewise you can include or exclude items. If you double click on the operation sequence, it gives you the order routing details, and you can manipulate all the information here. You can change your notes, add user-defined key and reference information, specify all the different things that you would similar to the part routing screen that we saw earlier. So these become fully editable for the job, and you can manipulate everything here. Okay, so we're going to save our order. Just go up to the button and click Save. Okay, once we've saved the order, we'll need to print shop paperwork. So we'll go to Shop Paperwork, and we'll check Pick List and Routing. And you have a number of selections here to choose from to print only the primary stock IDs, to sort through stock rooms in stock ID order, to print the on-hand quantity, description 2, to print reference designators, lot and serial numbers, manufacturer's part number, and exclude requirements that have a zero due quantity. Now we're going to select our order, and we'll run the report. Alright, so here's a sample here. You can see our pick list. It's for our part number Computer Max, part number 11,000. We have some reference designators specified here in all the components. It's specifying the stock ID, the due quantity, the on-hand quantity, and there's a field here for filling in what was picked. And if we go to the next page, we have our routing, and here's our routing sequence steps. We have some routing notes here. It specifies the run and setup time, what the current load quantity is, and the quantity completed in initials. Alright. After printing shop paperwork, the next thing we'll need to do is we'll need to issue the order, and then we'll need to process the order through its sequence steps in the routing. So to issue an order, you go to Inventory Control, Activity, Transactions, click Issue tab, select Shop Order. We can enter in our order number here, and we'll find the last one was done right there, and click the Query button, and you issue the order here. As you can see, we have some work to do because we have no on hand for these, so parts need to be created and purchased in order to fulfill this order. Okay, so we're going to adjust some of these parts so we can process our order in this demonstration. So we'll take our first one here, and we'll do a quick adjustment and process that. And we'll take a look at our next one here. Okay, now we have a couple of parts that have some inventory for our demonstration here. Okay, let's go back to our order. Query that. Okay, now we have some on hand. So we're going to issue what we can on this order. So we'll select those two items and process. Alright, so let's go back to shop floor. Okay, so as you can see here, after requerying the order bill of material, it now shows that there's a zero balance due on the two components that we adjusted and then we issued to. Our next action is to post operation completions. Now if we click on the Routing tab, we can see that there's a quantity remaining, right here for our first operation. So it's all queued up at our first operation. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to Activity and go to Post Operation. We're going to enter in our order number, and we're going to see what's available here to actually post. Now you can edit your operation completions and post scrap right in the grid here, or if you double click on the operation sequence, you can get the detail dialog box that allows you to enter in the information here. So we're going to go ahead and post at our first operation. We're going to enter in some time here. You can specify the shift. You can put in reference information. You have a user-defined key and reference here to put in as well. And actually, let's change this back. We'll go ahead and we'll post 900 and we'll scrap 100 here. We'll post that. We need a defect code for scrap, so let's double click and browse that. Select a defect code and post it. Alright, now if you have a specific GL reference you want to use on your post-operation completions, you can specify that here. You just double click and select. Likewise on scrap, if you want to override, you can do that here too. We'll cover that more in the costing section. Okay, we're going to use the grid for the remaining operations. So we'll complete 900 here. And 900 here. And we'll just fill these in and bring it right on through. You would post time here too, or scrap if needed. Okay, and that wraps up our operation sequences. Now at any time during processing, you can evaluate the current situation on the shop floor by using these inquiries. You can take a look at the backlog. We can enter a work center here. And it'll display what's past due, and it'll actually break this out in weekly buckets so you can actually look at the capacity, the queue, the backlog, what the total load is, if you're over or under capacity, and your cumulative over and under. You could also graph it. Click the graph icon and you can view a graph here of the current situation for this particular work center. As well, there are additional inquiries. Job progress. You can evaluate a specific order, and it'll show you all the different operation sequences at the work center for this particular order, and you can review that. You could look at your order shortage. Now we know we were short on this order that we were using. We can take a look at that here, and it shows you the shortages, all the different parts. You can look at the work center load. And it'll show you the load, total queue, input and output. And we can look at the part routing too. And you can inquire on any part routing here as well. Okay, so just wanted to go through those really quick. Okay, so getting back to our order here. Now, we created the order, we printed the shop paperwork, we issued the order, and then we posted operation completions and scrap for this order. Now the final step after the order has been completed through the entire shop is to receive it to stock. That's back in inventory control. Under receipt, you would select shop. We'd specify our order, query that, enter in the quantity if need be. It's displaying what's actually available to be received. So we'll go ahead and select that one and process. Now it's giving us some warning because we already know there were insufficient issues on this order, but we're going to go ahead and process it anyways. And now that's received to stock. Now we have 900 in FGI, our finished goods location. Okay, back over to shop floor. Okay. Okay, so that's how our rework order is processed. So we'll close that, and we're going to look at a few other things here. Okay, let's go back over to shop order for a moment. We're going to do a new one, but we're going to do something a little bit different here. So we're going to enter in our part number. You can enter in the quantity, query that. Now instead of actually creating a new order to create this, we're going to do a rework. So we're going to uncheck these and select rework. Okay, now what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and add our part and set up a process to do the rework. So we'll go ahead and save that. And we're going to add our part that we're actually doing rework on. And we're just doing a quantity of 1, and it's all entered here. Now, the reason we're issuing a rework order for the same part ID is because that's actually what's getting processed here. And in order for the costing to come out correctly, when you do a rework job, you have to actually enter in the part ID, which is the parent in this case that's actually getting the rework. So you enter that in here. You would actually add any components that needed to be replaced or added to complete this rework job, and you would process it just like any other one. So you'd enter in the component parts. Let's enter something here just for an example. We're going to add a keyboard here, and we'll have to purchase that because we're short right now. But for our example, we're adding the parent part, and plus we're adding any components that need to actually be entered in order to create or rework this particular part ID. So we'll go ahead and save that. Now if we wanted to, we can add special routing steps here for the rework. We can enter a sequence number. Add a work center. And go ahead and save that. Now we would process this much the same as other orders, which means we would have to go back and issue, and then process it, do an operation completion on this, and then receive it to stock. Okay, so let's look at some other options and details from the menu items here in shop floor execution that you can use. We'll go to activity menu, and as you can see here, there's a number of things that we have not gone over yet. One is maintain operation schedule, and what you can do in this screen is you can alter and change the plan scrap and the start and completion dates. We're going to pull up an order here and take a look at that, and we'll select a operation sequence number. We'll pick the first one here, and if we want to change the start and completion dates on these, we can maintain it here, plus we can add additional plan scrap if that's needed. Okay, so you can do that there. Okay, let's look at our next item here, which is post component scrap. Now you can use this screen to post component scrap after your issue transaction has been performed. Let's enter an order number, select a component. Now you quite simply enter in the quantity to scrap and the quantity to replace, specify your defect code and your issue from location. And we'll just do one here. Okay, and you can also specify a specific GL override for component scrap and for the issue transaction. So this actually does the scrap and issue transaction all in one shot. Okay, so you have a facility to do that on specific components. And Max allows you to split orders. We're going to take a look at post-order split. what you can do here is enter in your original order and enter in the sequence number you're going to be splitting from, which is our first one where it's queued up at the moment. You specify the quantity that you're going to split out, enter in the part ID here, enter the sequence number you're going to start from on that order routing. Okay, and you can save that, and what will happen here is Max will create a new shop order and create a new order bill and order routing for the new order based on this quantity that's being split off. Okay, so we looked through the inquiries. Let's take a look at the additional reports that you have here. Now you should take some time and go through and review each one of these reports, but I'll go over these very quickly here. The move ticket applies to subcontract processing, which is not in the scope of the training session. The order bill of material report is going to display and report on your order bill for a specific order or range of orders. Your BOM comparison report will compare your order bill of materials one to the next. You can specify one and then the next one. Your order routing report is going to give you specific information about the order routing, and this is a printout that's basically the same as the order routing on a specific order, as you can see here. Your order shortage report is going to display any shortages that you have on a particular order or range of orders. Your order status report, we'll go ahead and take a look at that one. We're just going to look at released, and we'll select a specific order here and go ahead and run that. And this is kind of handy because what it'll do is you can display an entire list of shop orders here. We just selected one, but it'll give you the status, the current quantity, the due quantity, the original due date, and the current due date. This is handy to look at a broad stroke of all released orders or all shop orders. Okay, part routing report is going to display or report on all the part routing information. You can do a routing comparison. You can do a history report. This is a report that will display all transaction information for any range of orders or individual orders. Transaction history is also displayed in Inventory Control 2, and you have a full selection of which transactions you'd like to view. If we double click here, you can see it brings up the transaction history browser, and you can make a selection of which transactions you want to view. All issues, all your receipts, and so on. Shop paperwork we went over. There's a standard routing notes report, Workcenter detail report, Workcenter detail by week, a Workcenter summary report, and process sheet. Now I'll comment on process sheet really quick, although we touched on that earlier in the session. Just remember, if you're going to use process sheet, you need to make sure that you set the switch in System Manager, System Configuration under Shop Floor, and select the process sheet paperwork if you're going to be using that. Okay, so the last item we're going to cover here is reschedule order routings. Now this program can be used to reschedule released manufactured orders and master scheduled orders. If there's been any change to the run and setup time at the Workcenter level, then Max will go through and adjust and reschedule the existing orders out in the shop to meet the due dates. Now this only applies to orders that have a schedule flag of R. I'll go ahead and close this and show that to you. You have our schedule flag here. We have Q and we have R for routing. So if your schedule flag here is set to R, then the program will address the orders that have that schedule flag. If they're set to standard Q, then it will not affect any of those orders. So if you want to go ahead and use this functionality, you got to make sure that you set your schedule flag to R for the orders that you want to have processed using this facility. Alright, so that wraps up our training session on shop floor. Okay, so let's look at what we learned in this session. So we learned how to set up shop floor execution. That included adding Workcenters, adding routers, and adding defect codes. We also looked at the preferences for the screens in shop floor execution as well. We learned how to process shop orders and rework orders. We learned how to manage released orders. And we also learned about the inquiries and reports. There are additional resources. The Max documentation that's actually contained in the links in System Manager under each module. You have a documentation folder on your server when your Max software is installed. It's under rmserver/doc. You have the customer portal. If you don't have access to it, please contact your customer advocate to get a username and password. And you can always contact me, Vince Stefanetti, if you need any assistance. And I'm in professional services and would be happy to help you. Thanks for attending the session, and I hope to see you in a future session. Thanks so much for attending.